This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 146, Why Introverts Make Kick-Ass Content Marketers. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is October 29th, 2015. Well, hello, howdy, guten tag, and thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and on Stitcher, so if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. And of course, if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post for this episode. Also, if you want to learn more about content marketing, I invite you to download our free audio, 5 Things You Must Know About Content Marketing. To get your copy, go to Content Marketing Audio, all one word, contentmarketingaudio.com. Before we get started, I've got a couple of shout outs. First of all, I want to say welcome to a lady named Latoya in Greensboro, North Carolina. She recently tweeted that she has a, shall we say, challenging commute to and from work, and she passes the time by listening to the Content Marketing Podcast. So welcome, Latoya. We are happy to have you as part of our little community. Also want to give a shout out to Georgina at Writer Access. A couple of weeks ago, or I guess maybe last week, someone had tweeted a list of something like 5 podcasts every marketer should listen to or something like that. And Georgina actually responded to the tweet and said, "Hey, where's the Content Marketing Podcast? That should be on the list." So I thanked her for her mention and we tweeted back and forth, and she tells me she never misses a show. So Georgina, thank you so much for being a listener and supporting the podcast. Okay, last week we had an epic I say, conversation with the man I like to call the godfather of content marketing. That is the one and only Joe Pulizzi, who was kind enough to join us and talk about his book, Content Inc. It's a wonderful book. Check out the episode if you haven't listened to it, and definitely grab yourself a copy. It's going to change the way businesses look at content. I promise you that. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to check it out on iTunes or on Stitcher or via the RSS feed. Today we are talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart: why introverts make kick-ass content marketers. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Okay, folks, there is a nasty practice going on over on Facebook, and if you do any videos, you definitely need to know about it. It is called freebooting. Now, as you may know, video is now the most popular activity on Facebook, and there are some seedy characters who are not playing by the rules. What they're doing is they're downloading videos from YouTube and then uploading those videos to Facebook and presenting them as their own content. That is absolutely unethical. It is against the rules of Facebook, and but people are doing it anyway. Now, this is not the same as linking. Linking is putting up a signpost to your content, and that is perfectly legal, and it's actually a good thing, right? We want people linking to our websites and our videos. But what freebooting is doing, it's stealing your content and someone presenting it as their own with no attribution. I think even if they do give you attribution, it's still not completely kosher. So, there are certain things you can do to both guard against freebooting, and if you suspect your content has been freebooted, you do have some recourse. You can report the person to Facebook and they can take the appropriate measures. So rather than try and give you all the ins and outs right here, I'm going to direct you to a post on Social Media Examiner. They had a very good post about it, and I will provide the link in the blog post for this episode, or you can just go to Google and Google Facebook freebooting, and you will find plenty of good articles about that. But nasty practice that we all need to know about. Okay, let's turn our attention to Twitter. Twitter is introducing what they call collections. Now, you may have heard recently, and I think we talked about it on the podcast, about moments. And that's where Twitter curates tweets around a particular event or topic, where if you access the moments for that particular topic, you will see the tweets, the photos, the videos, etc., etc. Well, now what they're doing is allowing users, that is, to create their own version of moments, which they call collections. And I'm going to quote you from the Twitter news release, or the Twitter blog post about this. They say, a new collections API that turns multiple tweets into a single story with a single collection ID, which can be used to edit, update, and publish that story from any of the tools in our ecosystem. So basically what this does is, if you have a lot of tweets around a particular topic and you wanted to, say, create a blog post about that topic, instead of having to copy and paste the embed code from each individual tweets, it's giving you a way to bundle those tweets into a collection and share that collection online. Now, it is an API, an application program interface, so you will definitely need to have some help from your tech team to access this. But if you want further information, I will put a link to the announcement in the blog post so you can learn more about Twitter collections. Also about Twitter, they are getting closer to introducing Twitter polls. Now, that's POLLS, not POLE. It's something I think we talked about a few weeks ago on this podcast. Twitter is introducing a polls feature where if you wanted to create a poll for your followers, you can create that right within Twitter. And we know a little bit more about it. We know that you can create a 2-choice poll. So, yes, no, boxers, briefs, whatever. The poll will be live for 24 hours, and anyone can vote, and people's responses are not shared publicly. People who chime in can rest assured their response will be anonymous. According to Twitter, it has started rolling out, and you will know you have it when you pull up the compose tweet window and you will see a poll option in that little box. So I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm looking forward to using Twitter polls myself. And if you get access, let me know. I'll be happy to vote in your polls. Okay, our content hit of the week is called 4 Secrets to Better Interactive Social Media Content. This is by Brian Hughes over on the Entrepreneur website. And I thought this was a great post to share because in social media and really in all of our content marketing activities, it's really easy to get into publisher mode, to just pushing things out there and hoping people react to the things we put out and like them and retweet them, etc., etc. And what Brian shares here are some terrific ideas for making your social content more interactive. Things like, quizzes, branded web series, things to get people more engaged and not just not just a push from publisher to audience. Excuse me, got a pug on my lap. So this is a great post. It's highly recommended, and I will share the link in the blog post to this episode. Okay, that's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, Why Introverts Make Kickass Content Marketers. It's hard to believe we're already winding down our birthday month. Yes, October 2015 marks 5 years in business for Resonance. And we've had a great time sharing some really unique content this month. And, it's birthdays and anniversaries, kind of those, for me at least, tend to be a time of introspection, looking back. And I was thinking about, gosh, why are we still here? I mean, really, given some of the colossal mistakes that I made in the early days, and I was thinking, why are we still here? And I was thinking about some of the factors that contributed to our success. And I think at least some of those I can trace back to the character traits that I have as an introvert. And yes, I am definitely an introvert, which some people are surprised to hear that. They say, oh, no way. I've seen your videos. I've heard your podcast. I've seen you at networking events. I've seen how much you put yourself out there. No way are you an introvert. But yes, I absolutely am. Dyed in the wool, tried and true, even married an introvert. So, And that got me to thinking about my journey as an introvert content marketer and some of the traits of introverts that can make us really inherently valuable to any content marketing team. Some of those traits that make us, as I like to say, kick-ass content marketers. So first of all, I want to clarify, because I think there's still a lot of misconception out there about what an introvert is. An introvert is not a wallflower. An introvert is not antisocial. We are not socially inept, nor are we shy. Shyness is very different. Shyness is a social anxiety where people choose not to express themselves out of fear. And introverts it's a very different, it's part of our hardwiring, and it's not a bad thing. And the best explanation I've heard about introverts and extroverts is comparing us to batteries. So if you think about people as batteries, extroverts get charged up by being around people. They get charged up by being in a big crowd with lots of social interaction and lots of chatter and lots of talking and lots of activity, maybe a lot of noise. And on the other side, their batteries get drained by solo activity. So if an extrovert needs to sit down for 4 solid hours and work on a white paper, it's not that they can't do it, it's just that it drains them. And when they get drained, they need to get recharged. How do they get recharged? By going out and being around people. Well, introverts have the opposite type of battery. Okay, we get charged up by solitary and quiet, thoughtful activities. That charges us up, and on the other side, we tend to get drained by being in the exact situation that charges up the extrovert, by being around a lot of people, situations with a lot of noise and a lot of chatter and a lot of really intense social engagements. Again, it's not that we can't function in that environment. It's just that, we can be very good socializers, but it saps our energy. And how do we get recharged? We go back to our solitary and quiet, thoughtful activities. I remember that you remember the Superman where he goes back to his fortress of solitude. I think every introvert in the audience was saying, "Wow, where can I get me one of those?" Because when we need to recharge, we need that fortress. And if I spend a day with a lot of networking, I've done 3 a days. I've had days where I've had networking, breakfasts, lunches, and happy hours. And I enjoy it. I love it. But afterwards, the next day, I need to spend a quiet day, just me and the dogs, and work on nice quiet stuff to get recharged again. So that's a quick overview of how introverts and extroverts are different. And it's not necessarily an either or. You're either an introvert or an extrovert. There's a sliding scale of introversion and extroversion. And now we have the distinction of what we call an ambivert. And that's a person who has the ability to tap into introverted or extroverted tendencies as the situation demands. Anyway, the topic of introversion really came to the spotlight a couple of years ago when Susan Cain published a book called Quiet. Now, it was, much to her surprise, above everyone else, it became a huge hit and was on the New York Times bestseller list for many, many weeks. It's probably still on the list somewhere. And it was funny to see what happened to conversations, because all of a sudden it was like it became cool to be an introvert. It's like almost like it became cool to be a geek when Steve Jobs and Bill Gates came to the foreground. I see people all over the map claiming to be introverts. And Susan Cain's book was good. I don't think it's necessarily the best book in introversion, but it was definitely a good book, and it really brought to light. It educated a lot of people on what an introvert is and why it's not a bad thing, and why we can contribute tremendous value. And introverts specifically have many characteristics that lend themselves beautifully to our task as content marketers. And I want to share 5 of those with you right now. Number 1, introverts are terrific listeners. If you see a group of people, you will know the introvert because they are intently listening to every word that is being said. And as content marketers, we've got to listen. We can't just be the bullhorn. We can't just be the loudspeaker that's pushing things out. We need to listen. We need to listen to what's going on in our industry. So we need to be listening for that good information to be sharing, and we need to be listening to our audiences. We need to listen to the kind of things that they are putting out there. We need to listen to their opinions. We need to request and listen to their feedback. And that's one area where introverts really, really excel. Number 2, introverts tend to be really great researchers. And again, as part of our journey as content marketers, we need to do a lot of research. It's kind of the next level of listening, really. And introverts tend to be very good at research because it's a very thoughtful activity. It tends to be a solitary activity, just you and the internet. Yeah, we may need to call up some experts now and then, but it tends to be a very solitary practice. And introverts tend to be very thoughtful and very thorough. And, we don't mind sitting down at a computer for a couple of hours and researching a topic. When I talk to people about what I do, they say, oh my gosh, you have to learn about all those different industries. I say, yeah, and it's great. I am never happier than when I get a juicy new industry that I get to dig my teeth into and do some research and learn more about it. So, that ability, that talent for research is something that introverts can really bring to the content marketing mission. The third thing is that introverts are not going to be the folks who gab on and on about themselves. Okay, they are not the person at the cocktail party who says, I did this and this is why I'm wonderful and blah, 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 blah. Introverts tend to be more interested in asking questions and absorbing the environment that's around them. So an introvert blogger, for example, would not be the one saying, oh, we need to create post after post about how wonderful our products and services are. The introvert would be the one saying, okay, let's look at our environment. Let's look at our audience. Let's see how we can be useful rather than going on and on about how amazingly incredible we are. Number 4, introverts tend to abhor small talk. If you see a group of people and an introvert is not speaking, generally the reason is that he or she does not have anything to contribute at this time. I tell people, you will know when I have something to say because my mouth will be moving. We're not one to just kind of gab on and on about things that are superficial or things that don't really matter. So your introvert content marketer will not be one to create content for content's sake, not create a post just to put it out there and to check that off my list. We value words and we value communication, and we don't want to waste someone's time by putting something out there, again, just so I can check it off my list. We want it to be meaningful, to be meaty, to be valuable for the people on the other side of that screen. And then finally, introverts tend to have small groups of close friends. They tend to not have huge entourages. Okay, we tend to have small groups of close friends, and introverts really know who their true friends are. Now, you may be thinking, okay, well, isn't content marketing about the numbers? Isn't it all about the traffic and the likes on Facebook and the Twitter followers? That's all important, but really what separates the men from the boys or the women from the girls in content marketers are the ones who can cultivate relationships with influencers and really bring something of value so that they can tap into those influencers' communities, and they can cultivate relationships with those key evangelists, people who are out there retweeting us on a regular basis, who are sharing our content. Introverts are very attuned to that, and we can really reach out to those people and cultivate those close, more intimate relationships. So I think those are 5 very strong introvert characteristics that we can bring to the content marketing mission. Now, on the flip side, introverts also have some challenges. For example, when we're out there sharing our content, we've got to be bold. We've got to be out there, and introverts tend to be very very private and very low key, and that can be a challenge for them to adapt to that. Also in content marketing, we share something of ourselves. We share something of our personalities, and introverts tend to be more private people. So that can be a challenge that we have to overcome. But I think, as far as introverts and content marketing goes, the advantages far outweigh any of the challenges that would need to be faced. So that is my take on why introverts make kick-ass content marketers. If you have any questions or want to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you, and I will give that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I want to talk about being bold. Now, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, as an introvert, I tend to be very low-key and very understated. And when I first started Resonance 5 years ago, happy birthday to us, I started creating content and putting it out there, and I realized that the approach I was taking wasn't going to work. I was being very respectful of people's attention, which we still need to be, but I was being a little too low key. And the point is, we function in such a noisy, and speaking of noise, I got dog noise behind me, please pardon that. We work in such a noisy and crowded marketplace that subtle and understated, while regardless of how good it is, how good that content is, if you are subtle and understated about it, it's going to get you lost in a crowd. So what I encourage you to do today, introvert or extrovert, wherever you find yourself on the scale, is to be bold. Okay, don't just share that content piece once, share it multiple times. Try something that might feel a little outrageous. Try new platforms. Put yourself out there in ways that you might not have thought of before. Remember, you have something valuable to share, and if people don't know about it, it can't do them any good. So be bold. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. If you like what you've heard, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our website at resonancecontent.com, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. This month, of course, we are celebrating our 5-year anniversary, and we produced a very special webinar to celebrate that called Stand Out, 5 Ways to Get Noticed Online. Now, that webinar actually took place yesterday, but the replay is still up and is still available. And if you would like a link to that replay, just hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn and just let me know. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from one of my favorite introverts, Steve Martin. He once said, quote, "I think I did pretty well, considering I started out with nothing but a bunch of blank paper," unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.